Let's talk a little bit about writing classes from scratch, because I think that allows me to migrate nicely to web services, which are useful things, fun things, and allow you to access programmatic elements across the internet, which is sort of useful, I think. So what I'm going to do is quality.demo.posen.
You also asked one question, but you didn't give us a chance to answer. You asked what we wanted to do.
Okay. What do you? Yeah.
I would skip files and directories and do the Windows Forms thing, and it shows. At least that's what I would vote for.
What, from Visual Studio?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me.
I don't know if other people are interested.
Yeah. Okay. Let me do this little snippet first, because it might segue a little bit. So I'm going to clear my workspace. Okay. So all of the Windows Forms stuff has gone away. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up a DOS command shell on a particular directory in my demo. Mainly because I don't want to use Visual Studio at the moment on purpose, because I want to keep this low tech. So all we're looking at is text that defines the code that we're looking at. What I've got inside this directory is a file called say.cs. Okay. And this is C# source code for a class. And it's fairly self-explanatory. The using system is analogous to our quad using system. What it says is that this text is going to elide the namespace system on its types. Okay. We're then saying we're defining a class called say, and then within that we have a public function called hello, which returns a string. And because we've said using system, that implies system.string, and it returns the string hello world. Okay. Then we have a function called goodbye that returns the string goodbye. Okay. Now the important difference between these two functions is that the top one says it's static. Now the declaration of static there means that this function can be called without requiring you to create an instance of the class. So when we did datetime.now or datetime.parse, that was a static function. We could call that without needing to create an instance first. Okay. Something like datetime.addYears required us to create an instance so that it had a base point for the years that you are adding to. Okay, so the second function here, although it doesn't use any instance-specific stuff, requires us to create an instance of the class before we can call goodbye. Okay, so this is a fairly simple class. You could write this in Notepad or whatever your favourite text editor was. Okay, and having written that, you can use the C# compiler, okay, to compile it and say /t, or maybe I can make this font bigger. That's probably a little bit better. Create me a library from the file called say.cs. Okay. And that has made a thing called say.dll. Okay. Which was made 1622 today. Now, if I want to use this class from Dyalog APL, what I need to do is modify my quad using, okay, to say that I want to use the assembly that's located in this directory. Okay, you'll notice that the quad using element there begins with the comma. Okay, because there's no namespace. There was no namespace in that class. Okay, so I don't need a namespace shortcut, but I do need to specify the DLL name, which is why I have to start with the comma.
Yeah.
Okay. In hindsight, if I'd done, maybe I could do that now, namespace John D, let's do that, brace, close brace, let's do that and save that. Let's compile it again. Okay. So now my APL expression, to be more in line with what we've been doing before.
The thing is, you got two commas there.
No, that's just doing, the first one's just doing a rabble to make sure that.
Yeah, but when you were speaking, it wasn't clear which one.
Okay. So now I'm saying use the namespace John D that's inside that DLL. Okay, so now I can do say.hello. Because say.hello is a shared method, static method, I don't need to create an instance first. Okay. If I try and do say goodbye, I get an error because I need to create a new instance of say first and call goodbye on that instance.
And hello still works.
And I can still do say.hello.
And s.hello.
S.hello works as well because the instance can access the shared member, even though it doesn't need to do it that way.
And then s.goodbye just returns characters.
Yeah. In fact, yes. That was a point I meant to make before. .NET Framework distinguishes between strings and character vectors. Okay, Dialog APL does not. If we call a function that returns a string, we generate a character vector from that string. We don't, in this version of APL, have a atomic string type. APL sharp, which we're looking at, will distinguish between strings and character vectors, but Dialog APL does not. Okay, and if we wanted to modify this so that it says goodbye cruel world, okay, save that. Now what's going to happen here is when I try and compile this, the compile's going to fail because it says it's in use by another process, because of course Dyalog has got the thing loaded. What I can do in my Dyalog is I can do a pren clear, and that would free up the reference.
Or
Online.
No, QuadyX isn't going to do it. So I can do a pren clear, I could do a pren off and come back in again. But the other thing that we have, which is useful in development, is on the file menu we have a thing called clear app domain here. And what that does is it selectively just throws away your active .NETness, but leaves your workspace behind and intact. So if I clear my app domain now, the S that I've got is no longer going to work. Okay, but I've lost the attachment to the DLL. So this will now work. And then when I come back here and recreate my use A, oh,
You have to do quad using again, or
no, quad using is still in there. So s.goodbye is now a tad more depressing than it was. Okay, so the point here that I'm making really is just that you can write your own classes. Writing a trivial class is a trivial operation, and you access that class from Dialog APL in the same way that you access any of the rest of the stuff, although you might need to put in the directory name where that file resides. Okay. Right, so let's moving on from that. Let's look at getting hold of things that exist on the internet, web services, and how we would access a web service using Dialog APL. Okay, because essentially that's a process that requires us to get some C#, compile it, and then use the class that resulted from that. Okay, the one that I want to use as a demonstration, I've got a couple, but let's use this one. As I was going through preparing this, I did a search for free web services, and this website popped out. And what we have in this what we have on this website is a web service called Global Weather. Okay, and what this allows you to do is it allows you to get recent weather information for a particular city. Okay, and the example that I'm going to use is, let me load my workspace. I'm going to use this information here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to get the weather for this location which is in the United States. Okay, so when we invoke that, I'll explain exactly what I'm doing here in a moment. What we get back is some XML that tells us what the weather is like in Princeton. And somewhere in here there's a timestamp, and it says time September the 16th, 2009 at 3:51 p.m. Eastern time, which was half an hour ago. Okay, let me explain what's going on here, and how we would cause this thing from APL. What we've got up here is where we started off. Okay, was this ASPX page called which displayed the functions that this web service has. Okay, and the server that's running that website has got code on it in ASP.NET that knows how to present HTML to us that allows us to run that web service, which means that we have a nice little test form that we can access over the internet to type in the numbers and get the result back. But what we actually want to do is we want to be able to do this programmatically. We want to be able to do this from our API session. And we need to go through a couple of steps. What we actually need to do is we need to create what we call a proxy class locally, which contains all the code that knows how to talk to that website, pass the parameters across, get the result back, and package that result back up to us. Okay. The good news is that we don't need to write any of that code because there's the infrastructure in place with the .NET framework that will do it for us. We just need to go through the steps. One of the steps that we need to go through is we need to follow this link here, which says WSDL location. WSDL is an acronym for Web Service Description Language. Okay, and if we follow this link here, what we will get back is this text that appears down here. This is the Web Service Description Language schema, and we can see in here that there is a description of something called Get Weather. Okay, that takes a city name and a country name, which is exactly the information that I typed in before. So this is the Web Service Description Language for this one function. Okay, and what we would do programmatically is we would follow this link, and the reason I'm not following it now is because I'm using IE8 and I do not know how to select just that bit of text. What am I doing? I can select everything. Okay.
What do you want to do?
I want to just
select it out
Can't
one
you
line.
just copy the link? Is that what you want to do?
You just want the text.
I just want.
What's the text?
Well, you can copy the whole thing to Notepad and delete everything except the one thing you have.
No, but I mean, if you right-click on the link, doesn't it offer you to
It appears not to.
Oh.
That's what you get for using IE.
Yeah, I know.
Create short? No.
It won't. Even the open linking. What I would do is look for the open link in another browser and then yank it from the address.
Will it
bar.
show up? Will the link show up in properties, or will that be for the whole page?
Anyway, so because I couldn't select it and follow it, I have prepared it earlier. And what I have in this file now is global weather WSDL. Okay. Which is just the result of my following that link and yanking it and putting it in this file. Okay. What I then have in my workspace is a function called weather proxy. And if I just trace through this, what it does is it, first of all, it shows us that WSDL in Notepad, okay? Just so that we can see exactly what's going on. It then calls a program that comes with Visual Studio and with the .NET SDK. So if you've got the .NET SDK, you'll have this. It runs a function called, not a function, sorry, it runs a program called WSDL.exe, and you give it the source code, the WSDL file, and it generates C# source code. Okay, so if we now use Notepad to look at that C# source code, this is what has been dynamically generated by, auto-generated, created by WSDL version such and such. So here we've got some C# source code. Okay. Our next stage is then to call the C# compiler to generate a dynamic library from that, exactly like I did with that say class earlier. Okay. And then we have, it returns the location of the DLL that it has just made. Okay. I can now put that value in my quad using, okay, again, which I've already done. Okay, and now I can now create instances of that global weather class. I can do wget quad new global, I think it's called global weather. If this doesn't work, I'll have to look at one of my pre-prepared examples. Okay, so now we've got a thing called W, which is an instance of global weather. I can do w.get weather, we're auto-completing here, and then get me the weather for Newark International Airport in the United States. Okay, so this chugs, calls that C# code that we've created dynamically, foodled across, passed that information across to the internet, to the server which is in the UK, and it's come back with that XML. Okay. What's just confused me at the moment is the last time I ran this, I got it nicely back. It looked like a matrix because the character and line feeds were behaving differently. So I'm a little bit confused. What I got last time was old principle.
Because you changed your page.
What she done?
I don't think it's quite been doing it. Because that's still there. And it doesn't really matter. What I will do with this though is I will take the result from the get weather and throw it at our quad XML function.
There you go.
Which will give me the information in a nice, neat way. Okay, so
Wow.
yeah, so I can get the weather for. So what I've got now is I've got a number of functions which have just got their hard-coded locations, and the weather function just traps any exceptions in case the web service isn't available, creates an instance of global weather, gets the result and returns it. So the weather in Basingstoke, let's quad XML that as well, just to.
Sunny.
Is no. Well, mind you, to be fair, what is it? It's
Mostly clear. Is it?
10 to 8. So this was taken at about 40 minutes ago, 10 to 8 at night, 55 Fahrenheit, 30 degrees C, chilly. So that's
Too bad. Welcome to the UK.
yeah. Mind you, it's not too warm. No, 20 degrees here. I mean, here is here. In fact, here. Let me show you this. Let's just go off thread a little bit. Princeton weather. If I run this function called show location Princeton weather, okay. What?
Gotta change
Weather United States.
Yeah, what did I? Wait a minute. I've
Oh,
got
it's split.
somewhere that got split up. That should be there. And that should be there. I don't know what happened. Okay, so I've got this thing called show location. And what that does, this doesn't use .NET technology. This uses our own COM technology to connect to an instance of Google Earth. Okay, and you may have noticed that in some of this XML includes the latitude and longitude of the location,
nice.
which we can extract and throw at Google Earth. The machine seems to be running very slowly. Okay, anyway.
Google Earth, that's so small. There we go.
The little pinpoint there is where we are at the moment. And then this location here
The airport.
is the airport where the weather station is, which is where we get the information from. Which is kind of neat. And of course, I can do the same thing, get what's the weather like in Basingstoke, show me that location too. Google Earth is fun. I have never learned so much geography in my life than when I started using Google Earth. I know where things are relative to other places. I know that the Atlantic is blue. So that's Basingstoke.
Underneath.
This is Odium Airport, which is the nearest point to Basingstoke, and somewhere in there there's a little weather station that takes the weather over. So that's cool, but the fundamental point here was you find a web service, it's trivial really to make calls to that thing programmatically. It's fantastic. The other one that I wanted to try was there's a translation engine on the same website, and you can say it can translate from such and such a language to such and such a language. I could never get the thing to work because I was going to play around with translating things into Chinese in a session to show Unicode character sets and stuff, but it doesn't work, which is very unfortunate. The one that does work, which I won't show you because it's not much point, was they had a text to Braille web service. So you give it some text and it returns the binary of a JPEG.
Wow, nice.
Which gives you the dots for what you should print.
Oh, yeah.
What you should print or put under your lift doors so that people know where it's supposed to go.
Bumper sticker. Put your hands on it.
So-
if you're too close.
So that's an example then of accessing something else that's remote that you don't necessarily know anything about, that somebody else has written that you can use. The thing that Jim asked a question about was if I wanted to use the .NET GUI from Dialog APL, what would be your design tool of choice? And what I would suggest is that if you wanted to build up GUI, just the GUI elements, no programmatic element, what we can do is we can go into Visual Studio and wait while it does what it does. It may not actually even be doing it yet.
Are you using 2005?
I'm using Visual Studio 2005 and I'm on Windows 7. That works. Although it doesn't seem to be a bit slow at the moment. So what I'll do eventually
Today.
What do you think of Windows 7?
it's better than Vista.
Ah, there you go.
Hemorrhoids are bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's a ringing.
What's worse than Vista?
Yeah.
Vista's, yeah, forget that.
I detested Vista with a passion. It was. Has anyone used any of the Install Shield products?
Yeah.
Sure.
Until I used Vista, I thought Install Shield 11 was the worst piece of software I've ever used.
Pretty bad.
It's just, it was bad, but everything I tried to do on Vista didn't work. And Windows 7 has got this little thing down here, as does Vista actually, which the search box,
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
which by default searches approximately 5% of your hard disk,
Yes, that's
Whatever's in there.
Thanks a lot.
which is useless.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
If I knew it was in that 5%, I probably know where it is. I didn't need to search for it in the first place.
Well, the solution is just index everything.
I know,
But
but
then.
Why don't they do
why
it
don't
for
they
you?
do that?
Oh, because it's a beta.
Why did I have to go to Google to find out that that's what I was supposed to do? And I had the same problems with Vista. I did the search on Vista. It didn't work. It didn't find things.
Yeah.
It wouldn't find email messages that had
Well,
stuff.
then you click on, after you've not found things in your initial search, then you click the advanced search, and you tell it to search where you really want it to, and then wait.
But I'm sure even on Vista, the advanced search didn't work for me.
Oh, really?
It found. I knew that I had an email that had this text in, and I didn't find it. But anyway, so I don't like it. It's better than Vista, but then as Brian said, Hemorrhoids is better than Vista. So. Anyway, what I'm going to do in Visual Studio is I am going to create a new project, and the language that I choose here isn't really relevant. I'm going to do it in C#, and I'm going to create a Windows application. Okay. And what's nice about Visual Studio is when I say I want to create a new Windows application, it gives me a new template, it gives me a form that I can play with and then I can add stuff to eventually.
Boy, modern computers are so fast, aren't they?
That indexing,
grows.
Faster.
that indexing is doing in the background is going really quickly. Okay, so here's my form. And I mean, I haven't prepared any examples. What I'll put in here is I will put a label in it. Okay, I'll put
This one, parts of the original.
I'll put another label in it. Hey! I've got the CPU meter down here. It's not doing anything. While also at the same time, it's not doing anything.
I have the same problem.
So I've got two labels on here. I'm going to change this one's text to be... gosh darn it. I'm going to change this one's text to be username, say. I'm going to change the text on this one to be password. Okay, I'm then going to create a text box, which I'm going to put there. So line it up. I mean, you know, Visual Studio is great for this stuff. See how it gives me a little clue and a little
Where to align it.
stop to make when things are lined up. And let's have another text box here, which will line up both horizontally and vertically without them. This one I'll set the password chart and put star. Okay, resize that down, build the application. Okay, right, now. Oh, it's still going. So this tells me that it has made this thing here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. I'm going to come over to my APL. I'll get rid of all this weather nonsense.
What did you copy your clipboard? Linked. What did you copy your clipboard?
Sorry, I just copied from here, from my output, from my build process. It says, basically it says, build complete, Windows Application 5,
Oh, just-
arrow.
Okay, just
And
the half name. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm now going to do quad using gets. I want to use that. Now, this is an interesting thing that I only realised the other day. That's an executable. I can run that as a program, but it's also a .NET assembly. So I can also quad use it.
And you didn't have to set that. When you created the app,
Didn't do anything.
okay, there was just, okay.
Yeah. So
So it's by
we'll quad
default.
use that executable. Sneaky, isn't it? And now we can do fgets quad new Windows Application 5, because that's the namespace it puts in by default. Dot, what was it, form 1? Form 1. There's our thing. Okay. And there's our password field. Okay, right, now, what I can't do, having done this, I can't access text box 1 or any of these things that I've made. The reason for that, I can just do it pretty clear here, it will go away, is the reason is that this stuff, when I drag dropped it, by default, generates private fields in the class, which means I haven't got permissions to look at them. But if I go through, if I find the appropriate thing, which is,
Text.
it's the modifiers. Modifiers is private. If I change that to public, then why don't I, while I'm here, why don't I change its name to be username? I'll do the same thing for password. Where's it going? Do the same thing for password. Change its name to password. And change its modifier also to public. Okay, I can build this thing again. Come back to my APL. I did a clear, so I just need to do the quad using again. John D. Strong password, and then we should be able to do f.username is John D. Is a control, so f.username.text. Yeah, and f.password.text. Password. So it's, and you can see, clearly you can see how you could build this format, make it as complicated as you like. You could put some programming elements in there if you wanted to, and then just do various bits and pieces and callbacks in the API where you felt there was a need to. So
What
it's,
did you say the formats?
what in the Visual
Does it have
Studio?
a type? Does the file have a type?
It's the executable.
It's an executable, which is kind of neat. You can quad use an executable, which I hadn't realised. But it's just an assembly, the same sort of thing. You can. There are options in Visual Studio where you can go through and actually make it a DLL so that it wouldn't try and run on its own.
Why did you assign this to using as opposed to just appending it?
Appending.
Because you assign this rather than I thought if you're adding an application from I thought you used quad using and you just append it as opposed to
No, well, quad using can be a vector of vectors.
Okay.
Okay, so if I'm only interested in using things that are on the system namespace, okay, then that's all I need. So that allows me to do datetime.now.
Right.
Okay. If I want to use datetime.now and in addition I want to use this thing that we've just made, I can concatenate that to quad user.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so quad is a list of places where it should go to get stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jim, that was essentially I think what you
Yeah, that's terrific.
yeah?
That's what I need.
Yeah.
Okay, jolly good.
Now, a question on that.
yes.
Okay, so isn't that going to generate more overhead than if we just use the Dyalog supplied form?
Well, it depends what you mean by overhead, really. I mean, that is a very slick dialog box, GUI editing tool. If you want to create GUI in .NET, and arguably you don't. I mean, I know, you guys are very familiar with the WC and stuff.
Right.
I can't see there's any reason for you to wholesale shift your GUI across from
Well,
that
Not
to...
a chance.
but the neat thing is that all of a sudden you've got access to a gazillion people
Exactly.
who know how to build user interfaces in Visual Studio. They don't have to know APO. They build the user interface, compile it, you access it.
Just a question of how much code you've got.
Yeah.
I'm
I
trying
mean-
to convert.
Yeah, I mean, once that GUI's been built, there's not a great deal of overhead in using it. In this example here, the only time I ever interacted with the API was when I actually asked it for the username and password at the end. All its functionality was not going anywhere near the workspace. So there's an overhead involved in starting that thing up. You've got
Yeah,
to put it in,
that's-
so you've got to load the DLL it would be. But loading DLLs, at any time in this process, probably 40 DLLs loaded anyway, so one more isn't really much of an overhead. You'll notice that, the C# Windows forms, I always think, aren't necessarily as snappy when you display them as the WC forms would be. But that's something that I may just be making that up. Or it's certainly something that users will get used to as they use more and more managed applications, not just yours, but from other people. But once the thing's there, it works just like any other application. It's snappy, it's quick. And then, getting information out of it, as we saw there, didn't really have a great deal of overhead. But again, it comes down to, if you want to use the Windows.Forms GUI, then a very good way of doing your layouts and stuff is to use Visual Studio. But the more important question is, do you want to use that? What advantages would any of you have of using the .NET GUI? And the answer is probably very little, unless there were specific controls out there that you wanted to use that we didn't have an equivalent.
Could you show what you do on the Visual Studio end just to make an APL callback? So you could review.
Well, I
You
mean,
don't have to do the whole thing.
Add a button.
Yeah.
well, I mean, what I could do is I could add a button to this.
Yes, and have it
Yeah.
call.
If I add a button down here, okay, let's make it, right, we need to make it public because in order to attach an event to it, we need to be able to see it. And we'll change its text to log on. That seems sort of consistent, doesn't it? We will build the thing. Couldn't, maybe it's still in use by Dialog APL, so we can close the app domain again, or we could do a create clear. Let's build it again. Okay, come back to Dialog APL, so we're going to quad use that. We're going to create it f dot, what was it called? Button 1 dot on click get foo. And what we'll do in foo is we will do f dot, what was it, username and password, get both of those and get the text out of each of them.
There's nothing on the message.
If we don't say that we need arguments, he won't give us any, but we can stick them in there. Why not? So do that assignment, f dot visible, that's one. Type some stuff. Cross your fingers, press the button. Okay. So there's. I tell you why I printed it twice, and this is probably a bug because I thought we had code that stopped us doing it. In the .NET framework, callbacks are chained, and I did the assignment twice. But I thought, even though in .NET that they were framed, as far as Dialog APL was concerned, it was a one-shot deal. So I think that second assignment should actually have replaced the thing that I put on first. Let's try that. Let's confirm that. Let me close F and create a new one and do that assignment just once and make it visible. And now it's only doing it once. So it's the multicast nature of that callback. Now,
So you can actually have more than one executable associated with an event?
you can have
So
more than
you'd
one.
have to button one
So how
down.
does that
It's-
work?
well, let me be clear here. The .NET framework, i.e. C# and other such languages, allow you to have more than one callback associated with an object. The fact that Dyalog in this instance is allowing you to do it may very well be a bug, because Dyalog APL does not allow you to have more than one callback associated.
Right,
with
so if
it.
you had, one was foo and the other was goo,
Yeah.
I mean, if you
they'd
look,
both fire off, wouldn't
they
they?
would
Are they
both fire off,
serialized?
yeah.
Are they threaded, or how does it?
I mean, I
They'd
understand.
be serialized, I would believe.
It's entirely useful.
It's all one thread.
It's actually a very useful thing to do in things like C# and the other languages. It is problematical for us in APL for a number. The syntax to do it is sort of different. How do we remove one of these is an interesting
Yeah.
question.
Very good.
In C# they use plus gets and minus gets to add and remove functions from that list.
Okay.
And,
Well, don't you,
and that's
aren't there properties for the on-click event?
yeah, but they're properties that return delegates, which essentially functions. So if we do,
So
and we don't have
you
arrays
got-
of, and we would have to have an array of function stage in there somewhere, which we don't.
So if you assign an empty.
But I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
I am surprised that APL is doing it in this case. It shouldn't be.
I actually think that's kind of neat.
It is kind of neat.
useful that it would.
But I would like to, if we were going to enable it, I would like to make sure that it was doing it on purpose.
Well, it's manageable as well.
Yes, yeah.
But I can envision,
Oh,
clicking
no,
a
it's-
button and firing off,
Yeah.
this particular event fires off 4 different business rules.
Yeah. No, I
Exactly.
yeah. No, I can see why it's useful. I didn't think that we did it. And I don't think we do
Very,
that.
reactive rules as well.
So anyway, so that's again how you would attach things to GUI. The key thing here is you have to make them public, and I think somewhere in the project there is an option to make them public by default, so we will need to go through the changes as well. It's 5 to 5, unless I mean I did have other stuff, but I think we've covered pretty much. What we haven't covered. Do I want to do this? Yeah, let's do this just for fun. We've talked about everything so far has been using .NET from APL. What might be fun, just briefly, is to give an example of calling APL from the VB. Let's extend this VB example that we've got now, if I've still got it, and get this guy calling some APL code. So what I'm going to do in APL, I'm going to do this quickly because we haven't got long, is I'm going to create a class in APL, and I'm going to call it, let's just call it from APL. Okay. I'm going to create a function in this class, okay, called foo, because that's what all functions are called. Okay, this is a public function. Okay, and I'm also going to make this a static function so that I don't need to write code in the C# to create an instance of it. Dialog, we don't use the word static that C# uses. We use the word shared, which I think is a little more meaningful and is the word that VB uses to mean the same thing. Okay, and this function is going to return a result, and it's going to return a character vector hello from APL. Okay, that will do for now. Okay, I am going to first of all I'll save that as C:\tum from APL. And I'm going to go to my file menu on my session and hit the export option. And what this allows me to do is to export my workspace as a .NET assembly. Okay, so here, for example, it's defaulted to the location that the workspace is in. My save as type is Microsoft.NET Assembly. And I'm just going to uncheck this button down here that says it's a runtime application. So I now hit save. Okay, and it's now created C:\tum from APL clear out. Okay, right, now, come back to the C# application. I want to use that APL class now from this C#. What I need to do is I need to do a sort of quad using thing. The easiest way to do that, given where I am, is to add a reference here. Right click on this, do add reference. Hit the
When you add a reference, you're basically adding a memory notification, right?
No, I'm adding a reference to that file is what I'm doing right
It's
now.
like plug using.
So I'm going to browse to c:/term, and I'm going to add a reference to from apl.dll. Okay, so that's now in that reference list right at the top. I'm now going to modify my form so that when I load my form, okay, my username field .text can get initialized with from apl.foo. So we get the autocomplete because we named it foo. Okay. Now the extra step that I just need to do here, because when I define that foo, I didn't say what the return type was. Okay. So as far as C# is concerned, the return type of this is not a string. And because it's not a string, it's not going to allow me to assign it into text, which expects a string. But remember, we've got that toString function that takes anything you give it and converts it into a string. So if I do that, okay, that will call the function, take the result of the function, and make sure that it's a string. Okay, I could probably do a cast here. Okay, but the advantage of doing it this way is that I could modify foo to return iota 100, and it would still then go into the thing. Right. So now we build the application. We can now run the application. And when it finally props itself up,
Notice it.
oh, there's an error list there. What was that? Okay, let's just have a look, see what's going on. Through an exception. Right, okay, what's happened here is, sorry, I'll explain rather than just moving on. What the exception says is it says system.badImage format exception. Right, what's happened is, this is a 64-bit machine. I've been using a 32-bit APL, but this C# application that I've built defaults to building a 64-bit app, and I can't load my 32-bit assembly into the 64-bit application. Okay. So what I can do with what I have to do here is, if I go to my project properties and change my, where is it? Somewhere in here there is a change the CPU. Right, here we go. The build is currently targeted at any CPU because it's C#, so it can build a CPU neutral thing. It's just the APL, because there's some managed and unmanaged stuff going on, needs to be either a 32 or 64-bit. So if I change this to x86, now I want a 32-bit one, which is 86, yeah. And
64 or 64, 32 or 86.
Don't get me started. I don't know, do any of you do sort of Windows API programming? You're familiar with user 32 and kernel 32, which are called user 32 and kernel 32 on the 64-bit system.
Yes.
In a directory called system 32.
Yes.
But they're 64-bit DLL. The 32-bit subsystem on a 64-bit Windows, which is a subsystem that 32-bit applications use to run on that platform, their DLLs reside in a directory called system while WOW64.
Sweet.
I understand why they've done all those things, but it doesn't mean that it's right. Right, so start without debugging. Let's see if this works this time. So there's our username field, which is initialized with hello from APL. So it's loaded that assembly, loaded that workspace that goes behind it, and off it's gone. Now what we can do now, just for completeness, let's come out of that. So let's go back to our APL and take our from APL class, and let's just stick an error in this. Okay, this little button up here that looks a bit like a barber's pole, if we click that, it re-executes the export that we last did. So that's recreated the DLL. If I now run this guy, I don't need to recompile it. Now what happens is we're going to get an error in the APL, and we get our APL development environment up. Okay, so that we can now see where we're at. We can change our result. Our gets. Hold on, I need to change the keyboard line here. Okay, go back to my function, take that out. I can now.
Could you just branch around it?
I could have branched around it, yeah, but if I do it this way,
Right.
then we've got all we fixed it in there. And if I call the function again next time,
Yeah,
it'll work.
yeah.
Now, I mean, that's sort of cool. The gotcha here is that hasn't saved that change to the workspace that I built the assembly from. So that's a one-shot fix. You have to go back, load the thing, and fix it again. But all of those things are things that we want to address with Salt. You know, if I built that from a Unicode file, then the debugger would know that once I fixed it, that was the file I needed to write it back at.
What happens in a runtime environment?
In a runtime environment, there would have been an exception very much like that one that we... In fact, I'll tell you what, why don't I show you? If I now re-export this, but check the runtime application button, okay, and make thing. Now when we run the application, we get an exception, a dialog exception, which says that there was an exception from APL.foo line 4.
Okay.
Okay, so it generates an error that the C# may choose to trap it or whatever he wants to. Okay, but a runtime application, by definition, doesn't have that development environment.
Right.
So it does something sort of sensible. Okay. Now, the progression that would normally do from here is, okay, we've now defined a class in APL that I can call from stuff. Now, another place where I can call that class is from ASP.NET. So I can have a class that implements a web page.
Right.
I just point the IIS at it and it will do stuff like that. I've got another example. We talked about that global weather web service. I could write a class in APL that implements a web service, navigate my browser, my client browser at that web service. In fact, I mean, feel free to wander off if you've had enough. And what I've got here is I have what I'm running on this machine here, I've got an XP virtual machine, okay, which has got a web service on it which is written in Dialog APL. It's a class that derives from web service. It contains a number of functions in it. The data that I'm using behind all this is my now infamous CD database. Okay. If I run the artists function, okay, in fact I can leave that field blank. What this returns is a list of the artists that have recorded all the CDs in my collection. If I run the by function, what are the albums, CDs by a particular band? Okay, so that lists all those by those guys. If I say what's on the album called Flying in Between by these guys. Okay, and what's on there is those tracks. And the way this is implemented is that in a workspace called cdbservice.dwas, there is a class called cddb class, which just contains a number of functions, one called by, one called on, one called stuff, and that's a web service. And so this HTML, these forms that we see here, I've not written any code in APL to do that. The very fact that I've written a web service with public functions in it means that all the stuff that Microsoft have written on this machine generates this HTML for me, gives me a mechanism of testing this stuff, so I make sure that it all works. Okay, so if we were going to flip exactly what we were doing before, what I did an hour or so ago was I created I found that weather service, got the WSDL from it, created a proxy, which I then could use from APL. I can do exactly the same thing in Visual Studio and open a recent project which I've called Jukebox. Okay. Okay, which has got some GUI somewhere. Which has got some GUI. Okay, there's the GUI. It has a reference, has a web reference to a thing called Streamer, which is down here. There's the URL of what it references. What it references is that CD2B service thing, which is implemented in that workspace. Okay, so if I run this application, okay, what happens is when I type into this field here, it calls that artists function, and it returns the list of artists that match the characters that I've typed. So T.O., Anton, Fig, Boston, Catatonia. So I can go through that list. When I click on one of these, it calls the by function in the web service. So it passes Toto across to the VM, but that VM could be anywhere on the planet. That returns the list of albums that these guys have recorded. If I click an album, then what happens is it calls the on function that I talked about, passing the artist name that's selected, the album name that's selected. Okay. It also calls a function in there which I mysteriously called secret one, that returns some HTML, which is a reference to the type to the cover of the album. Okay. And then when I click on this guy, this box is filled in with a bit more HTML from the mysteriously named secret 2 function. And the HTML that appears down here contains code to embed a QuickTime viewer or a QuickTime player. Okay, which will then go off and it has a URL to the track, which then streams across to this machine. And it's all running from that's just in this workspace, and there's not a lot of code there. Here's the code that generates the HTML for the QuickTime viewer. You know, embed a QuickTime thing in there. So, you know, all of these things work in all the directions. I can, oh, too much. Well, maybe not enough for some of you. I can write the web service in APL and call it from C#. I can write the web service in C#, call it from APL. It doesn't matter what direction you're going in, and it all works the same way. What I can do, sorry, I'm terribly excited. That workspace that I made from APL, okay, I could quad use that from APL in exactly the same way that I quad use everything else. Let's use from APL.dll from APL.foo is going to error because it's got that from AP. Well, no, because it was a runtime one. Oh. You know, generated an error on line foo. So I go APL to APL, C# to APL, APL to C, all that stuff. Nobody cares what language any of that's written in.
Right.
It's just a .NET assembly, and you just use it and you get on with your life. So, we'll stop there because we've shut over anyway. I have no one has a plane to rush.
What's this compiled down? Is there any other? APL just looks same overhead, same characteristics as anything?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the assemblies that we produce are essentially little binary stubs that contain a workspace. Okay, and then at runtime they spawn up a DLL, which is an interpreter DLL.
Right.
Okay, which is why you get the development environment stuff, because it's just running the same code as your interpreter in a slightly different flavour.
I can't share the DLL, or can I? Suppose I have 3 or 4 users doing things and so forth.
You can do. If you share the DLL, then you're sharing the workspace as well with the other
That may be okay.
application. And if that's okay, that's fine. If you want a little bit more isolation, then you can configure it so that your assembly runs in your workspace,
Okay.
someone else's assembly runs in their workspace. You know, you have that option to separate things if you want to do so. Anywho, so I'm going to be around tomorrow as well, so if anyone's got any questions, if anyone is first of all still here and has any questions either tomorrow or this evening, then come and find me and I'll help you.
No, this was excellent.
Yeah, thank you.